So every time
Yeah.
Tucker makes a joke at those stupid dim-witted journalists, he goes, it reminds me of also of Amadeus's laugh. Remember the movie Amadeus, the Mozart movie?
Yeah, more.
He would laugh just like that. But it's a killer laugh because when he laughs at you, those liberals, it's so high pitched, they can't quarantine it as a conservative laugh. It feels more
Yeah,
liberal than them by tone, and therefore it
yeah,
defeats them social status, Just
yeah,
instant destruction of their social status rung that they're on at that time.
yeah.
It
It
phenomenal. That was phenomenal the way he tore up those Australian broadcasters. He said, I thought you guys are smarter because you have a beautiful country and some really nice people, but I think your journalists are just as neutered and stupid idiots as ours, but
Well,
maybe a little
actually,
dumber.
it's actually dumber than what he sees in
Yeah,
American media, right? Like that. Don't you feel a little bit ashamed? Like, what the
yeah,
heck?
yeah.
Like, this is the
And then that
question
girl,
you're gonna guilt trip him, right?
that one journalist girl said something like, he went on this very elaborate thing to try to connect with her and empathize with her,
Yeah,
help her,
great
and then she goes, "So
replacement.
you like gun control, right? That's what you want?" I was like, "He's so stupid."
It's like another Kathy. What's that journalist anchor's name who interviewed Jordan Peterson? Kathy
Yeah,
Brown, something.
yeah,
Oh, so you're saying you hate women?
yeah.
What the heck?
Well, she tried the reverse. She tried it like he had spent such a long time explaining, like, "No, I'm not the monster you're looking for." And then
Yeah.
she was like, "So that means you want gun control, right?" And so she was trying to say like, "So if you're not evil, that means you think like I think, right?"
Yeah, it's like
And
they
it's like,
can't.
God, I thought you were just pretending to be dumb. You really are dumb.
Yeah, it's
Just
like they
like
can't
that, you know?
imagine a world. They can't imagine a world where you're like either this or this. You can't be outside of
Yeah.
both, right?
Can't be
It's
a
so
you can't
stupid.
think. You can't think. That's the number one thing you cannot do in the empire of lies. You cannot be a
Yeah,
journalist like Julian Assange, and you cannot think,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. You can't form your own opinions. You have to go by our binary way of thinking. Like if you're not one of us, you're a crazy Republican or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
and
yeah.
and Tucker's very hard on Republicans too. Like that's refreshing to see from him. He's like when he was asked about Mike Pence and what Mike Pompeo, uh, so he was really hard on them too. So
Yeah, he
like they
said,
can't imagine. They thought he'd be for Mike Pence. I don't
yeah,
know why that lady asked her about Mike Pence. Like what?
yeah.
Well, like they can't imagine like
Because in
cons-
their tribe, you're all, whoever, there are no enemies to the left of you, right? So it's all part of
yeah,
their same team. They're all on the same, united
yeah,
front when it comes to opposing the opponents that they're
yeah,
trying to hate. So she can't
yeah.
conceive of that reality, and those people can't conceive of that. But
And
you
that's
know,
how
that,
you
go
yeah.
ahead.
That's how you defeat these binary thinkers, right? You just give them something so unexpected that you be so real and be so unexpected that they don't know what to make of you.
Yeah.
Like they're,
They don't know what to do, do they?
yeah, they don't know what to do. They just go into reset mood, ting, ting,
That's
ting,
why
like a
art,
Windows.
art
Yeah,
and performance art and all those different forms of art is the key to the cultural engagement, right? And that's why
yeah,
I recently posted that it's one thing to go out there and whine and complain all day because the public, and I've done that in my past, and I probably have done it sometimes not remembering, uh how silly it is, but I have done that probably, to some degree. I've always tried to be a little bit more redemptive and positive towards the people that I'm trying to critique, but I know the feeling. I see it in these people that say, anybody, is more of a libertarian or anarchist type position, or not even that, just anti-establishment or something, where you're saying, well, there's no point in, engaging in any of the mainstream political narratives unless you're just part of the sheep thing. And it's like, it's neither option is correct, right? Like the option of you're engaging
yeah,
in it on the level of a mark as a wrestler, as a fan of politics, where you really believe that, like, Mike Pence is a sincere, earnest version of what a Christian looks like. That's like believing that, the character you watch in your horror movie is truly a goblin, when in reality it's not. It's an actor and it's CGI. And if you take that, oh, what does Mike Pence think? He represents a sincere icon of what Christians should think. What does he think? I mean, that's a dumb level of naivete that's humiliatingly embarrassing. And to think that, like a lot of Trump fans, that, oh, this guy is the only thing that stands between us and these guys. I mean, come on, that is also stupid and ridiculous. At the same time, though, because we have to just be honest and not dumb liars about the truth, we have to be realizing that the other position of, oh, I'm too good to ever get involved in those narratives and enter into those spaces is also a losing position because, uh, you know, people say, well, the whole point of government is all ridiculous. It's like, well, saying that doesn't make it any worse. I mean, or better, saying 100,000 times till you're blue in the face that all government is corrupt, evil, and all that, tweeting that out, Facebooking that, Instagramming that with a meme, none of that makes a difference to actually repealing or making the world a better experience to live in. It doesn't help you. Oh, if we get one more meme out about the evil of the state, then our taxes will go away. It's not how it works, right? It has to go through the art world. It has to go through culture. It has to go through religion, which is deeper than that, and it has to go through what I talk about with the engineering paradigm shifts that have to take place in the world of reality. That those are the things where all the real action is. But what people miss out, here's my point, people miss out on such an opportunity to play within the symbolic world of politics and to use its own pageantry against itself, which is what I do and when my work.
Yeah, that's very well put. I mean, like, people take a very narrow way to approaching these things, right? They take like the critique that you spoke of, like just memeing out government. Like, it's not like everybody does not receive that information in the same way. Like, there are just there's inevitably eventually going to be people who are going to receive information through the way of art, through the way of whatever, like podcasting, whatever you want to point at. People don't like people just aren't convinced that it's saying the government is bad that it necessarily makes it bad. A lot of people have a view of the world where they have like the lesser of evils kind of approach, right? Like, this is all we have, this is all we have got. And so you need to like, what through whatever way is possible, you need to make them realize through first of all what's honest to you, what you're really feeling, right? You just parroting someone else's opinion isn't going
Yeah,
to really, like, you have to say something that you really believe in.
right.
And what you really believe in isn't necessarily going to be condensed into one paragraph or one sentence, like in a definition way. Like, what you believe in and is often communicated through things like poetry, movies, and this is why the left is so effective, is because they have the feeling, they have the intuition of the hardships and the suffering and all of this. And they have the feeling that a lot of these things are man-made, not
Yeah,
like this is not necessarily the lesser of two evils
right.
approach or anything like that. They feel that these things, these sufferings are needless and man-made. It's like, that's why you see them talk about acceptance, tolerance, and all of that, because they recognize that it's all man-made and they want to
Yeah.
fix it. It's just that the way they go about fixing it is, it ends up creating more problems than it
And it's
actually
ironic
solves.
how the liberal mindset is one that is so pro-human it tends to deny the fallen nature of man, and it's very
Yeah,
pro-human in a heavenly sense without the fall part grounding its expectations. And at the same time, it's been hijacked by this more malevolent establishment impulse, which is what I call neo-Malthusian, which wants to eliminate a lot of human flourishing period because they think it's good for the earth. And that has impulse that more malevolent, which is anti-human, has latched onto like a parasitical dark force, the liberal naivete which is this Rousseauian notion that, humans are innately good. And you're right, all the problems are just some bad ideas that we've institutionally picked up along the way. Um, and they've hijacked that good impulse of self-criticism. Recently, I talked to Jerry Boyer about the mote in the eye, and I was trying to emphasize in that discussion, and he didn't want to make it about left or right, and I wasn't either, but there is a general Western impulse to extremely mutate that mote in the eye concept into a perverted form of self-hatred, which is what the liberal ends up falling into, which is still it's a hatred of their neighbor as I'm more liberated than they are, but they're liberated in the sense of their acceptance of self-hatred as a framework to aspire to. And that self-hatred of human flourishing ends up being parasitically exploited by more psychopathic, nihilistic forces that don't have any good views of mankind. They're just cynically exploiting the weakness that the liberal mind has fallen into. And of course, the right-wing reaction to all of that is mostly a waste of time.
It's mostly like, where did this impulse of, where did this feeling of self-hatred come from? I would say it comes from a very fundamentalistic, puritanical environment, right? So, like, much of the Enlightenment period, or whatever, like, that phase might be known as, in history, that was known, like, like, where people were obsessed with, taking out the speck of sawdust from the other's eye. That's like the Victorian era and all of that, right? Where they were like very hyper focused on the modesty part, the aesthetic, of not too bright. Everybody, everything, like even architecture and everything, had to be, dull and very gothic, very, very, like, non-scandalous, like it should not create scandal or anything like that it's from that.
Nobody was allowed to look like a wow, in other words.
Yeah,
Everything was
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so no radiancy, nothing at all, and from that, you create a kind of underground, which was like, like this, what you sort of saw in the early 1920s, where there were like widespread deviant sexual deviancy and all of that, all of that sprang forth. This was before the, like, during and after the first world war, right? Like everybody, girls started cutting their hair short. You see the suffragettes, you see the first, embryonic form of the sexual revolution and all of that. And that, what did that come out of? That all came out of a reaction towards that kind of thing, that Victorian era kind of, mentality, the puritanical mindset. And you see, like, now, that we see with the new right and all that, you see another form of reaction towards the sexual. So it's all kind of like, pendulum swinging back and forth kind of thing. And it's basically a story of, particularly the West, a story of them trying to get the balance right. And that's like what they have to figure out, like
And
how
the
to get
balance
that.
though gets off because they're mimetically focused on their rivals, so they're always swinging to the opposite instead of finding the harmony,
And
which
they would.
the harmony requires not worshiping your rival or hating them, but this loving thy neighbor as thyself, which means a proper love for oneself and a proper distance to one's neighbor, right? Because you can't love your neighbor if you're up in their grill, right up breathing on their face, and you can't love your neighbor if you're too far away because you see them as an inhuman, speck of color or light, So you have to be right at the right distance of your neighbor, which is the balance between differentiation and undifferentiation, which is the Trinity, right? Unity within diversity, differentiation within undifferentiation, this kind of this oneness within differentiation manifested in that.
Yeah, and people would figure this out way sooner if they'd taken the Gospels very seriously. But unfortunately, and this is the sad reality with the conservative side. is that they often use the scriptures and the Bible as a kind of, like a shuriken where like ninja start, throwing it to
Yeah.
their opponents with Bible verses, but instead, like, take instead doing that instead of taking the gospel seriously and really understanding what the person of Christ was all about and how Christ acts in history. And I would say that the artistic side, the left's artistic side is particularly successful because even though they might not admit it overtly, but it's they're successful because they're haunted by that person of Christ.
Yeah.
And this is why you see the Christ archetype throughout movies. People, they whatever they want. Like the thing about this motif of self-sacrifice, it's just inescapable. It's like it's automatically like a
Yeah.
trump card, if you will.
Yeah. Did you see
Whatever,
the
like,
Warriors of Virtue, that movie I talked about?
oh, forgive me, I
Yeah.
could not.
That movie is a can't miss film, and this talks about this guy who is a handicapped figure who gets viciously scapegoated by the football team, and he almost gets flushed down a giant kind of whirlpool that looks like almost like a giant toilet, and he comes back and he has an experience, a kind of nightmarish experience of facing his own ego.
That that's a unique way to get transported into another world, get
Yeah.
flushed down the toilet.
Whirlpools are always so uh big, right? In a lot of storytelling, whirlpools, huh?
Yeah, it's like the symbol of spiraling. Like a lot of movies, they show the Bermuda Triangle and all of
Yeah.
that. It's like that spiraling symbol is very predominant throughout history.
Yeah.
Like you can see it in some of these ancient civilizations where they use it a lot, and it kind of like astonished archaeologists, like the universality of that kind of symbol.
Yeah.
It's like the eternal circular, eternal return, that kind of circle.
Yeah.
Snake eating its. David Lynch referred to it in one of his interviews, spoke highly about it. What's it called? The Ouroboros, something like that. Snake eating its own tail, a circle symbol found in Hinduism and a lot of other civilizations.
Wow. So you are interested in writing, and I wanted to talk about your work that you have out there on the marketplace. Something that I think is folks look at the current events and they're interested to pick up a novel that might kind of reflect something of the times. You've got one that you have, a novella, no less, right?
That's right. It's called The Reenchanted. I hope
Okay.
you can see it. Okay. So it's a novella. It's not too big. You can see it's very thin.
Yeah.
Uh it's
Yeah.
very thin. So yeah, I mean, like I began writing this during the time of the lockdowns, and what inspired me to write this is basically like and I think you would have felt this during the lockdowns too, is that your sense of personality being drained away, right?
Hmm.
And if you are stuck within a small space with no freedom to go outside, no freedom to,
Yeah.
explore the world and all of that, you there's something inherent about us which, like it makes us long for that kind of freedom, and
Especially if
and
you're
I
stuck in a HOA during the lockdown, because then you've got tyrants on
yeah,
top of It's like a Russian doll of tyrants.
yeah.
Every
Yeah,
level of your life is a tyrant. You're stuck in this little
yeah,
townhouse or wherever you stay, apartment or whatever, and they've got a HOA, and you think, okay, I'm away from the psychopaths on television, and I'm away from the psychopaths at the drugstore, but now I've got this psychopath who's complaining about the size of my flower in my 4x4
Yeah.
backyard, in terms of feet. So,
So I would say like if you've read the Orwell's novel 1984,
mhm,
the main character in that novel starts, like he sees that something is wrong with society, all of that. He sees the thing, information getting memory hold, all of the things that we are seeing nowadays, I guess, censorship and all of that, and scapegoating of an imaginary character, and so, to keep the society going. He sees all of that. Winston, that's the main character, and he
sure,
starts maintaining a diary, right? And the reason he maintains a diary is because of his longing of, individual sovereignty, like
right.
our ability to, write down things, our feelings, our thoughts. That's like the last bastion of human sovereignty that you see in totalitarian societies. Like if you see, it's like if you read the works that were written during, like, diaries written during the Holocaust, and Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago and all of that, those kind of literatures, they tend to be really, you know, epic, in the sense that all of these works were written under totalitarian societies. And it, it's it's very fascinating that human beings write down these, like, their the act of writing down their feelings is like the last bastion of personhood. And I don't know, it seems like it connects some way to Christ being the logos, I guess. To
What is it about writing a novella that you felt was the best way to express yourself? It's just because you couldn't make a movie or write a poem, or what was that form, and how does that medium relate to the culture differently from those other mediums or media?
well I wanted this, like, I wanted to write a story which is biographical in many ways, but not quite autobiographical, because of course it's in poetic form, and it's not written down in a factual basis. So uh yeah, I wanted to write down what I was feeling, and I want and that novella that I wrote, it had to be about the things that I was longing for, right? And what do we long for when we are constrained, when we are restricted, when we are imprisoned? We write about personhood. We write about freedom. We write about you know uh, violence, persecution, and all of these things. And all of these things have to intertwine. And if we have these ideas down on a piece of paper, then we have clarification with ourselves.
So you were
And
longing
we
for violence, or you mean you were writing about the violence of the system you were in?
well, of course, I'd be lying to myself if I didn't say I was longing for violence. Like any prisoner who is imprisoned will always have a sense of retribution or vengeance within him.
Mhm.
So there's a lot
Like
of
that's why the
writers.
Pilgrim's Progress he had a lot of violent scenes because he was in dungeon,
Yeah.
right? As he wrote it.
Well, that's why many, like, not only Pilgrim's Progress, but many stories have violence. Like violence, like, there are more stories about violence than there are stories about romance and all of that, or
What is it
comedy
about
of.
violence that makes it such a ubiquitous part that attracts us to take the time to read through page after page of somebody else's mind? Why is it that violence draws us to it?
Uh, but the why violence draws a reader to a book is because violence is everywhere. We would often pretend not to see it, and we would make excuses about it. We would say, like, we've reached some level of society, some level of advancement in our in our culture, where we would like to pretend that violence doesn't exist, but violence always exists everywhere around us. And that's why the Gospels were about, it was primarily about violence, right? Like a lot of Christians don't want to recognize this, but this is the reality. And like if you like, for example, if you are getting a speeding ticket, if your car gets pulled over by a cop and you're getting a speeding ticket, the threat of violence looms overhead, and that's the reason you are uh, forced to receive that ticket, right? Because of the violence that's always looming over us,
Yeah, the
over
threats.
a
It's
threat of
always
violence,
threatening and coercing people, right?
right? And
So people
uh,
feel like when they're in a bureaucratic form of violence, it's nice to read a book where it can be manifested in a direct way because it kind of gets it out of their system. They're tired of seeing the fake version of it around them. Do you think that's what it is?
uh, I don't know. Like, of
Like,
course, there.
get it on, like if you're watching a, action sequence in a book or a movie, it kind of helps you discharge the psychic energy that's built up all around you with all the forms of coercion that you have to go through. Like going to the DMV and sitting for hours to get your license plate renewed by the king, and their bureaucracy is a kind of banality that is so boring and soul sucking, right? And so it's kind of like it builds up this kind of built in kind of internalized coercion, right? That then you watch a piece of movie where you see the bad guy or whatever get defeated or something. It kind of releases that psychological discharge into that
That's
sublimated form.
that's a great point. I actually deal with this in the novella. I don't want to like spoil the story or anything,
You already
but that
did. Oh my goodness.
well, I mean,
The final
you have
scene is in
to.
a DMV getting your license renewed. My goodness.
Well, I mean, you have to read it to find out how I deal with this problem of like our inherent tendency to see the villain's butt getting kicked by the hero, right?
See, now
That's what
you're
we all.
invoking the violence of capitalism to get me. I have to read it now to get my experience. Oh my goodness. See you. I see you. I'm just
Well,
kidding. I'm
an
just joking.
artist has a creator has to find ways to create, and
Right.
they don't come cheap. So
Yeah.
you
Boy,
can
those
call it
Marxists, they expend a lot. They charge you a lot of money for their hipster products that they make. My goodness.
yeah, and then get the money from the state, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of these Marxist
Yeah.
movies were made from state funds, your
Yeah.
taxpayers' money going to some weird
Yeah. All these
art.
Herbert Marcuses, everybody was a member of the intelligence agencies, and those are supposed to be the avant garde leaders that all these people rebel against the system. It's pretty laughable, but. All
Yeah, I
right,
mean,
where were you going though? You were going somewhere.
yeah, I was talking like I just wanted to like add on to what you said about like we're all like our cubicle society, like people who work in cubicles, like those kind of people would want nothing but to see their like adversity, see their bosses being kicked on the silver screen, in the form of whether it's Thanos or like somebody who wants to snap fingers and take away half the world's population, and they want to see their butt kicked, and they want to see the villain vanquished. That's why the villains are always much more powerful or overbearing, because subconscious mind, that's
Mhm.
how we picture our
Yeah.
bosses and everybody, right? Like they're big, like they show up in your dreams, like these, I mean your
I
boss
like
may be a
that point
little.
you just made. That's really good. I like that. And
Yeah,
that's
I
kind of a
mean,
Christ haunted aspect of a good antagonist is that they have to be very powerful because nobody likes a story. And this kind of predates the Christian story even, but you look at the Greek tragedies, the villains they fight, the scapegoats that they devour, but they don't
yeah,
say they devoured a scapegoat. They say they battled Cyclops or all these super powerful figures. And we don't ever portray a story where the defeat is very easy against the antagonist. It's like, you know what I mean? We never,
yeah,
even if they're physically weak, they have to be psychologically powerful or financially powerful or very powerful. We don't like it's certainly not a satisfying cathartic experience if the hero defeats or overcomes the challenger in a very easy way without much of a competition, right? That's not exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be that way because if it were that way, then you're not relating to the person and the person who's going to pay the ticket to watch the
Yeah.
movie, right? If you are, if you make
In reality though, so many times the people that we think are going to be a big opponent fold very easily. So there needs to be art that portrays that. And I guess there probably is if we think about it long enough. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, I mean, to your point, there's a lot of movies that for example, the new latest batch of Star Wars movies, which portray their characters as Mary Sue figures or Gary Stu or whatever, like the perfect
Yeah.
protagonist, right? They can do no wrong. They pick up a lightsaber and instantly they know how to control the force and everything. Uh, so like there's a lot of that these days, but that's the reason why these movies are failing is because you're not giving them the payoff after the struggle. Like any good movie will have the audience relating to the main character because life is tough, life is a struggle, and that should be reflective of
Yeah.
the main character's quest for the Holy Grail, right? It has to come at the end of a long journey. So like the people in like directors and story writers in yesteryears knew how to tap into that, but unfortunately right now today we have come to a place where it's much more mythological in character than it's really you know
Do you,
a hero's journey, that
do you
kind of
think
thing.
well, even the hero's journey is mythological in the way it's designed to, hide the reality of the scapegoat as the
Well,
dragon.
the hero's journey is actually a Christ haunted
Right,
reinterpretation
right,
of the
right,
ancient mythological stories did not give 2 cents about whether the audience related to it or not.
right. Yeah.
This was your religious.
Yeah, it was.
This
You could
was
say it's a fossil. It's kind of like a textual intermediate fossil between the mythological world and then the really Christ haunted world we're at right now, where we can't have any, like you said, we can't have much in even a hero's journey. We're so mythologically
Well,
confused.
I mean, the hero's journey is basically dreamt up by a bunch of psychologists, 20th
Yeah,
century, and trying to put everything in the psyche, like much like good
yeah,
example of is Jordan Peterson, right? And he's very big on the hero's journey, but at the same time his approach is very much Christ haunted because he does not expect, or nor does anybody who writes about the hero's journey expects you to accept these texts as doctrine or dogma, right? This, like, as a society you have to revolve around this unanimously and point to the villain who is basically the scapegoat,
yeah,
that this is the villain that you have to overcome, and by eliminating this villain society is saved. But the hero's journey is like a pre-Girardian approach to dealing with these mythological texts. I think Girard approaches this much more completely, in a much more holistic sense, in
yeah.
the
Much
sense
more. I
that,
would say a much more Christ affirming sense than the hero's journey approach, which is a good transition, but not sufficient.
yeah, and that's because Girard recognizes that these mythological texts that speaks about the quote unquote hero's journey have really a lot to do with the society and the violence that controls society. So it's not, everything is not in the individual's mind, it's on the collective psyche as well. So the ancient mythological story, the writers and the scribes who made these mythological stories, they were right. Girard was saying they were right. They knew perfectly what they were doing. They were controlling society from spiraling out of control into undifferentiated violence.
Yeah,
And this is and it's because the hero's
yeah,
journey and those who
yeah,
write about it, they don't
yeah,
want to zero in the bloody reality
Yeah.
of society,
Yeah. That,
because of their Christ hauntedness. You
yeah.
get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
why I think that's one of the reasons why the conservative mind doesn't make a lot of good art lately for a variety of reasons. One of them is that it is the natural conservative impulse to say, well, if we're in such a Christ haunted society, let's not talk about it too much because we could really inflame things and create more chaos. There's a feeling that they don't think that it's a feeling, right? Like, when they make their movies, they want to have a happy ending. If you notice that about conservative movies, they never, a lot of these conservative people, Christian filmmaker, like evangelicals and stuff, they make these movies where it's got to have a perfectly happy little ending. And they get really angry. One of the things that they're very angry about when there's a movie with a kind of open-ended ending, they get really mad. And I
Yeah.
don't mean to be, I don't
Yeah.
mean to be, I don't mean to, mock that. I understand. I mean, I can get irritated when there's a artsy ending of what happened. It's left for they get mad at those movies. But it's because the conservative mindset is to say, hey, let's not get too close to the sacred because that might cause a lot of explosions if we go there. And kind of let's go ahead and give a healthy, cathartic, bad guy wins, good guys doing better off now because that creates a little bit of discharge for the crowd that's watching it. And therefore, if there's millions of people in the country that are watching this movie, they too can have a psychological discharge of their tensions that have been evoked by the movie and be safely back on their way back at their office. The conservative wants to keep things relatively the way they are. The leftist says, hey, let's see what we could do further, right? And that
Yeah.
always is a losing game. That's not the Christian. The Christian cannot make an alliance with the way things are. The Christian, behold, I make all things new all the time. I'm always making something new. That's the spirit that's supposed to animate the Christian imagination. And it does, but it's suppressed for various reasons. Like you mentioned, this fear of tampering with the sacred and not wanting to, it's like the Plato didn't like the playwrights, right? Because they were playing too close to the revelation of the scapegoat. Well, Plato represents a lot of Platonic conservatives in churches, and you know what I mean? That Platonic impulse of let's
Yeah.
keep things hierarchically the way they are and differentiated. That that is not a winning. That is not a winning impulse to give into. I understand why, and on one level, I can see why it's a safe place to stay, but you can't go there. You've got to go wild into the wilderness, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to, go wild with your creativity. And I think the Christian story is an indication. It's a command, if you will, to go wild with the story. I mean, you talked about the closure and the open-ended thing. The closure, what is the closure that the audience always craves for? The closure is basically our unconscious
Yeah,
need to have a
yeah,
scapegoat at the end of every
yeah,
story, right? And
yeah,
the open-ended story, why do a lot of people have a problem with that? That's because it's stepping into a gospel technology, if you will.
right.
The Bible, I mean, if you read the scriptures do
Yeah,
not end with everything.
yeah,
It's an open-ended reality. It's an open-ended
yeah,
uh, story,
yeah,
right? The gospels end
absolutely. Yeah,
open-endedly. Yeah, like the apostles, Christ gives it's like, just imagine a movie. Christ gives the commandment, the great commission, and the gospels end right there. You don't see the apostles going out there. It's like the journey is just beginning, right? And even in the end of the book of Acts, we don't see the real actual ending. The church obviously continues. It continues to grow, and there are
yeah.
many more adventures that the
I
apostles
love Acts,
embark
but it's
on.
still compared to the gospel. It's
Yeah.
and I'm gonna have to say this, but it's more like a direct to video sequel. It doesn't feel as exciting as the gospels. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that.
Yeah.
Luke is written. Luke and Acts are like two parts of the same book, but I'm just saying I love the what happens in Acts, but it's just I'm magnetized back to Luke. That's where that's where the blockbuster events happen, and then Acts is
Yeah.
exciting, but I mean getting shipwrecked is just not as exciting as resurrecting. I'm sorry, and it's okay.
I
They
mean,
thought the same thing too. That's why they did what they did.
it's like, it's almost like, if you've seen the, I don't know if you saw the latest Dune movie, David. Did you see the recent Dune movie?
No, I have not.
Uh,
Everybody keeps talking about it.
Yeah. So it's I love that movie. You should go and see it. It ends perfectly. It's like this the main cat Timothy Chalamet was the how I don't know how to
You
pronounce his
said
name. This
Charlemagne?
no Chalamet whatever I don't know
Oh,
I don't know how to pronounce his name. Okay, so forgive me. So
I
his
thought you were
character.
mumbling the word Charlemagne, the rapper, that he was the main character. That guy that's on Breakfast Club. I was
Oh
like,
boy,
what? What is going on?
Charlemagne the God, yeah. So his character is like proclaimed as the Messiah, right? Like
Yeah.
that's like borrowing from the messianic the tropes of all of these Middle Eastern religions, including Christianity. So they're about to. It's an open-ended movie, and they're about to embark on a war that's going to
Mhm.
wipe out half of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't show us the war and everything. It doesn't need to show us, because it ends so perfectly in an open-ended way. Like the rest of it should have been left to interpretation. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I heard the story that they're going to make a sequel, and oh no, this is like it's
Yeah.
that's the problem with this franchise. And I think that's the terrible tragedy of
Yeah.
creativity. I mean, if
Yeah.
you want to talk about it,
Yeah.
like people like you don't get the ecstasy uh, that you get, like if you're creating something, it's during the process of that creation. And this is what Bajev talked about a lot. It's a tragic thing, actually.
Yeah.
If you're creating something, you get the ecstasy, you get all of the enjoyment, you get the simulation of the all of the mind and everything. You get that it's like you're in this oneness with God. And then you have to close the story, you have to end the story. And once you've ended the story, it's like you're bidding farewell to your child or something. So and that's really the problem, whether you want to look at Hollywood, whether you want to look at everything. And I think David Lynch knew this. That's why he did like we talked about this in our Twin Peaks
Yeah.
conversation. That's why he was dealing with the audience reaction of Twin Peaks and all of that. But this is a tragedy that we have to end creation. But I think, like, even with art, and I think art, writing novellas and all of these stories, all of these things are not the entirety of our creativity. I think God has something even more bigger in store for us.
Yeah.
Some people may call it their own entire lives, or like raising a family,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
all of
That's what
that.
I always talk about, is that our lives are meant to be performance art. Performance
Yeah, and
means
it's
action.
continuous, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
performance just means action, and so the idea of that your life is lived in action, which is artful or artistic, it has aesthetics, is the entire point. It doesn't mean the dumb way of looking at it. It means it in the earnest sense of, talking about the synchronicity of life,
Yeah.
the unique moments of life, the poetry, the mystery, the confusion, the successes, the ways in which you can mix your imagination with somebody else. That's all art. That's a living embodiment of art. And so you're never not an artist. Every human being has a vocation to be an artist
Yes.
through their life, and it doesn't need to have an audience of a certain threshold to be significant, because if God is your only audience member watching, that's an infinite audience that's beyond anything you can capture here on earth. I was watching the documentary of Celine Dion that just came out, where it talks about her life, and she's got a stiff person syndrome, which is a type of thing where your muscles all lock up, and it's very devastating, and eventually, allegedly, can rob the voice and everything, because you don't have your lungs are fine, but your muscles are trapped in a stiffened, spasmic prison that disallows the ability for her to get those notes out that she's known for. And she's talking about how sad she is, that she can't do the one thing that she was born to do, which is to sing. And and how much that her whole purpose of life is to give joy. And she feels like her singing is like an apple tree, and people are in line to get those apples that she produces, and now her branches are falling and people are still in line to get those apples, but she feels like she may not be able to deliver the apples that they're expecting to get, because she's not able to sing and perform like she wants to. and she's not satisfied with just doing recording studio albums. She's all about the song is not as important as the performance of it. And by the way, that reminds me of how important something we've lost with novellas and so forth is, typically the author, and they still do this in some areas, but it's not something that is as common as it should be, where you're supposed to read your story, and reading your story aloud. If you could go to your local library and read your story aloud to an audience, and performing it aloud is an experience
Yeah,
that's very primordial, or whatever word you want to use, tapping into something very special about human experience, having a
yeah.
communal reading.
That's why audiobooks are so popular these days, right? I mean, you can make a case that people have to listen to audiobooks because of time constraint
Yeah,
and all of that. But at the same time, there's something special about listening the author's voice,
yeah,
reading his own story, creating the sound effects of his own. Like it's so fascinating. Like it's almost like you know it, it's almost like listening to how God uh creates
yeah.
art in our life. And like I don't know about you, David, but I would love to I would love to see hear God read out my story when we all get to heaven, or the kingdom of heaven, or the afterlife, whatever that is. I would love to have God recite our story. And like people, you come across all of these movie scenes on YouTube and all of that, and you see comments like, "I would love Samuel L. Jackson to narrate my story," or "I would love, uh, you know, uh, Werner Herzog to narrate my story." Like, wouldn't it be so fascinating to see God recite our story, or read out our story?
Hmm.
That would be
You're
something.
talking about your
I'm
life
just,
story or whatever.
I mean, not necessarily my life story, but like story of our story of our time in general, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah,
not necessarily every details. Like, of course, like there's some private things that would love to remain private. I don't know if
that's
you've
what the book
seen.
of life is, isn't it? Kind of an image for like the telling of your life story, and seeing whether your
Yeah,
where your role of that is, and the reality of the cosmic
yeah,
tapestry that we're in.
yeah, yeah.
When you see the way people relate to um, society today, do you think that the novella like yours has an ability to get people to break out of their groupthink, or do you think it's not designed to do that? It's only designed to do something else.
Well, I mean, of course, like I wrote it so that I could break out of groupthink. And if there are inquirers out there, inquirers in the sense of, like, not really inquirers or in the religious sense, but inquirers of, like, people who want to know, like, who are confused as to what is going
Mm,
on. Like, of course, like there are many people out there who are doing 9 to 5 jobs, just going on and on and on in the mundane everyday life, but not really knowing what they are accomplishing. Like, there are plenty of people, for example, who are not married these days, who don't have families. They just wandering, like, back to their homes after doing these average, insignificant jobs. And that's why you see a high spike in depression, you see a high spike in people wanting to end their lives
yeah,
and
that's one of
things
the
like
well,
that.
that's one of the things that I think about the future of the kingdom of heaven on earth, is that eventually we're going to get to a point where people will all have the wealth and the freedom to do things that are really fulfilling. And people often think that that will cause hell, and I don't think so. I think
No.
it's not true,
Yeah.
because people say, "Oh, well, if you get every human what they want, then they're going to be even more miserable and fighting over it." And it's like, yeah, I can see how that can happen to some degree, but that's not a fixed ratio of like every time there's more opportunity for people to follow their dreams, so to speak. I know most dreams are mimetically influenced, but dreams in a transcendent orientation towards expressing yourself as God created your ability to do, those dreams are very beautiful and very right and good. And I don't think that a society where more people are able to do that is a bad thing. I think that's a good thing, and we should encourage that. And a lot of these people who want to pine for the old days of industrial capacity back. Let's make stuff again. We do need to make things, but we don't want to fetishize and romanticize, being, moving a wrench on an industrial assembly line over and over again every day for 10 hours a day, every day, just moving that same wrench on that same disconnected part on a car. Doing that over and over again is not the what God designed. I mean, it has its role when humans need it, but the role should always go better, so that that guy who does the wrench thing, maybe he wants to fish, or maybe they want to, do something else, or design a new type of pocketbook, or something more inventive and entrepreneurial. I think Jerry Boyer was right when he said that Jesus is kind of like an entrepreneur. When you think about, he's creating a startup, and that mindset of entrepreneurial, creation of something new is a kind of spirit that I think the future will be more inhabited by, and we have to model it for people now, right? And one of the ways that you do that, I think, is in having more open-ended art. I think you're right. When you close it up, it's okay. We know who the bad guy is, and we know who killed the person, and therefore, it's been defeated or whatever. But when you leave it open-ended as to what happens and what the resolution is, sometimes that allows for the scapegoat search to go on, which means the light might shine on your own heart, and people don't want that. I think that's why, really, I think that's why people don't like closed stories, is because it leaves the scapegoat to look into mirror still. You can still, oh, maybe I'm indicted in this. Oh, no, that bothers people, right? They don't, no, 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 no. Discharge the energy you've created. Tell me I'm not the villain. Tell me the villain has been defeated, so I'm safe. All those herd feelings. I want to be safe from the villain. I don't want to be the villain. I don't want to be accused. I don't want to be in the same room as the villain. Let the good guy be clear. Let the bad guy be clear. That's not life. But yet conservatives have said, no, that's what life is about. The good guys wear white hats, and the bad guys wear black hats, and that's the way it is. And then they sing Johnny Cash songs, don't they? Right, the Man in Black, and they don't realize the irony that's lost on that moment, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's that's one of the reasons why, like, if you read a lot of novels and short stories or whatever, there's like this, and I think you can you have noticed this not only in the literature world but also in the podcasting world as well, where there's like this insane attention to detail, right? Everything has to be detailed. It's like you need to have produced something encyclopedic or something. Like I think that's not healthy creatively. Like, you need to let your, like, especially when you're writing a book, there's very little room. If you're writing a book, there's very little room that you have to, that people often leave for the readers to become engrossed in the story. You need to have them engaged. You need to let them become part of the story and let their mind go wild. Let them imagine a lot of things. Don't don't say, don't describe how many inches the table has to be, or how many, like, I think that's so counterproductive.
But that's common in like Tolstoy's novels, right? Where they're really detailed, right? Why is that?
Yeah,
And I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but everybody
yeah,
has their style. You got Faulkner is known for his long-winded prose, and then you've got the other
yeah.
hand, Ernest Hemingway, which short, quick little sentences. He jumped up.
Mhm.
He went to the bar. The drink was cold.
Yeah,
You got Faulkner with these elaborate, words in detail showing the cobwebs in the bed, and every little detail of the velvet. What is where do you think that all fits into your description?
there I say it in two ways. There's one way to see why so many of these great writers, and like Tolstoy and Faulkner, so many of these great writers engaged in such hyper descriptive prose, is because they wanted their readers to not feel like they're reading some fantasy work or anything. They're interacting with actual people. They're
Yeah,
like they're really walking through the streets of Moscow, or they're
yeah.
really walking through the streets of Nashville or whatever. Like they want to get there. Like that was how these writers wrote, and that was the thematic material, is that they wrote about the real world. And another more cynical way of looking at it is like let's face it, a lot of writers like to indulge in things a lot. All right. So a lot of creators like to indulge in themselves a little too much, and that can
You think
often turn out to,
indulging? What do you mean by indulging? How is describing the velvet texture? Because
well,
it
it's
makes
like
because it's showing off how good they can write.
it's
Every
like
little.
purple prose. Like, if you're like, have you read anything written by Anne Rice,
Yeah,
the vampire novelist, right?
yeah.
Like the vampire stories. Oh my God, it's so filled with purple prose. It's like everywhere, everyone's so gorgeous, everyone's so beautiful. That guy is so beautiful. That's like the artist indulging in themselves, and it like it can be bad or it can be good. I mean, it shows you a lot about the artist's personality
And it
one
makes a
way,
lot,
right?
but you know what? It gets a lot of those. They sell books that way. It's ironic. The details sell.
Yeah.
She certainly sold a lot of copies of her books.
Well, I mean, most readers are they're looking to escape from reality when they read a book, especially in fiction, right? They want to be taken away into fantasy world, and that's what C.S. Lewis tackled with the Narnia stories, right? They want to escape away in the fantasy world where they are free to scapegoat, where they are free to hunt down witches in the subconscious mind, or not necessarily in the negative way like that, but also in a positive way. They're free to find the person of their dreams in that book. And you will find this especially with female readers. They'll find they're like the rich billionaire or the rich vampire, or whatever. This is like one of like one of the number one hooks. You can get female readers, you can
Mhm.
use those to get in that. And that's because people want to get away from the real world, and because that's the real world is so brutal, the real world is so violence ridden and all of that. They just want to get away from that.
Mhm.
It's like how Christians want to go, escape the real world and go and fly away into heaven, right? It's the same kind of mentality. And that's why C.S. Lewis wrote the Narnia stories about escaping into another world, but that the other world, Narnia, has consequences for it. Like it has significance that impacts the real world too. So that's how C.S. Lewis cleverly, leaned into that, but at the same way redeemed that Alice in Wonderland kind of trope. So people want to escape into a fantasy world to get away, and that may be another plus factor for Tolstoy and Faulkner, is because they didn't want their readers to escape into a fantasy world with all these overtly descriptive things and all of that. They wanted their readers to by showing how irritating these characters are. They like, you can, if you know how to empathize with these irritating characters on in the books of a novel, then you can find it much more easy to love your neighbors who are
Mhm.
equally as irritating, and annoying, and so full of
Mhm.
contradictions. So I think like
You think they were trying to do lessons like that, or it just comes naturally in their
well, I
desire?
think Dostoevsky certainly was trying to do that. Dostoevsky's like his atheist characters were always highly intelligent, highly intellectual, and they were much more smarter than the orthodox priests or monks within his novels. And they were so full of they were so like, if two of Dostoevsky's characters, yeah, the Christian character and the atheistic character were having a debate with one another, Dostoevsky would be just forced to make that atheist come out on top, just because the atheist has better arguments. And like at least in his zeitgeist, they had better arguments because of all of the hypocrisy in the religious world and so on. So,
He didn't see the
you know,
cold fusion in the Shroud of Turin. That's why he didn't understand, did he? Yeah.
I don't know, like those in those days, um, people were just close-minded. The religious people were close-minded, and that brings us back to the Victorian-esque puritanical mind that births the things like the sexual revolution and so on, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the reasons why they say the church does well when it's being persecuted, because it tends to get its memory of what Jesus is about more situated into its mind culture.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what's something else that you want to share with us? Maybe any insights about the making of this story that we can leave with that gives people some interest in working on their own literature, picking up your story, and doing something else in their own life.
Well, I mean, the number one thing, the number one morale, I mean, of course, you're not supposed to write your story in a propagandistic way where you preach anything. But if there were something to be taken away from this book, is that you it's a call to be brave and to embrace the future, to get out of stagnation and to, I mean, you spoke about dreams. Even if your dreams are mimetic, like even if your dreams are mimetic, they can often have wonderful things in these dreams as well. For example, like if some loved one of yours has passed away, like chances are you'll dream about that person more as the years go by. So those are things that call you to embrace those things that you have learned in your childhood, to embrace the goodness of life, and to have empathy for others, and to embrace the future, not be afraid of the future, not embrace a totalitarian state that prioritizes coward cowardice, timidness, and obsession with safety, but head bravely into the future and create something of your own, so that those who follow you, those who, like, whether they be your children, your siblings, whoever, they might benefit from your
Mm.
adventures.
Well, very good. And the book again, can we see the cover so we know what to look for? And it's on Amazon, right?
Yes, it's on. Sorry about the focus. It's
Yeah.
on Amazon, and it's
Reenchanted
on the Reenchanted,
by Surit
and
Dasgupta.
yes,
It's available
y-
now. So check it out, folks, and let's think about what we can do to build the future as well. Thank you for your time.
thank you.